All right, hey guys, this is take two. I tried putting this together earlier and got about 7 minutes into what we're going to be talking about today, and my phone, or the phone that my wife's phone rings, which is right behind me, interrupts the whole thing. Can't get it turned off, and then about 2 minutes later, another phone call comes in. I was wondering what the heck that was, and turns out that Anderson upstairs had used the iPad to call the police department. He dialed 911. So, the struggles of learning from home. Anyway, so a lot going on here. Sorry about the background. I'm trying to stay outside now, so hopefully that problem will be solved. And back here, got my quarantine's been getting to me as far as my golf. Been missing my golf, so I've put up a net that I stretch across my porch, hit golf shots into that, but I got to do something. I got to get out there. But anyway, two things, guys, before we get started. First of all, just wanted to say I saw the video that I'd be put together yesterday for the teachers, for teacher appreciation, and I just want to say, look, guys, that made my day, and I appreciate y'all and thank y'all so much. I was really touched by that, and I'm sure all the teachers were. And it's just very, very special. It's why we do what we do. And second thing is, I just wanted to say that I want to kind of throw the credit back on y'all, just because, I mean, throughout we've been in quarantine, learn from home for almost going on 2 months. What is it, April, or it would be May 17th would have been 2 months. But anyway, we've been learning from home in a different environment and trying something completely new, and y'all's work and work ethic, the quality of work has not changed, and that really speaks volumes, guys, about y'all, the caliber and quality student that you are, how much you care about your school and in your work, and I'm just really impressed by it. And I just wanted to say y'all are awesome, as always. Always knew that, and y'all continue proving that. But I just wanted to say that I'm very proud to be part of your education and to be your teacher, and I look forward to us all getting back together in the fall and being able to see y'all. And yeah, anyway, hope everybody is doing great on this Wednesday. Okay, let me straighten that up a little bit. Okay, so just a quick little video, guys, today about trying to wrap us up. We finished World War II. That's where we're going to stop, and obviously. And I just wanted to kind of touch on some last little pieces of information to wrap up this unit, and then we will be done. So first of all, when y'all finished, y'all got through that web quest on the World War II battles, and you got all the way up through the idea of what it would be like for an attempted invasion in Japan, right? So just to recap a little bit about where we are up to that point. All right, the Allies have been closing in on Berlin. Remember, America took a Europe first approach in World War II, even though it was the Japanese that attacked us when Germany declares war on the United States. That opens the door for the United States to be able to focus on providing aid and propping up our ally Britain in Europe. And as the walls close in around Germany and around Berlin, April 30th, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker. The power is going to shift to people, high-ranking Nazi officials, Himmler, Goebbels, people like that. Himmler is going to kill himself after he is captured by British soldiers. Goebbels is going to kill himself along with his family. All of them are trying their best not to get captured because they're worried about what being captured would mean. All right, especially if they're captured by the Soviets. All right, we've talked about that in class a couple of times before. But anyway, and so eventually, finally, on May 8th, 1945, the Allies are able to get an unconditional surrender signed from the Germans, and that officially ends World War II in Europe. All right, make sure I ain't got too bad of a glare on there. There we go. And then that focuses the entire war effort and really just America's attention back towards the original foe. in the Pacific, the Japanese, right? And this had been, the Japanese had been on the losing end of World War II pretty much this entire war, right? They attacked Pearl Harbor. They did a number on Pearl Harbor, but really the year following that, they are going to begin basically the process of losing this war. Midway is going to be is going to basically break the back of the Japanese Navy when they lose 4 aircraft carriers there, a number of battleships as well. That is going to be a huge loss for the Japanese, and it's also at that point in time that we had cracked the Japanese code, so we understand the messages that they are sending, and we are intercepting those messages as they come through. But it is really America's ability to outproduce the Japanese. The production levels that America has at their disposal is going to be far greater than that of the Japanese. And by the time that we enter into 1944 and 1945, the war is pretty much over. It is just a matter of when. And we've been talking about the Japanese in class since last semester, and y'all know already, right? There's nothing in the mind of the Japanese soldier and the Japanese military at that point in time that would allow for a surrender to be thought of, right? Especially an unconditional surrender, which is what Truman is going to be calling for at the Potsdam Conference, which y'all know this, but FDR, right? He's elected to a 4th term. April 12th of 1945, he passes away. So right before we have victory in Europe. But anyway, Truman takes over. That was his vice president. And Truman at the Potsdam Conference calls for an unconditional surrender and basically promises that if the Japanese refuse, that they're going to be utterly destroyed. All right, surrender or be destroyed is the message coming out of Potsdam. And it's something that definitely. Stalin is at that meeting. And there's definitely I wouldn't say a fear. I don't know if Stalin really feared too much, but there's definitely a concern that America now has a weapon or now has a capability of producing war that would outmatch that of the Soviet Union, right? So, if you want to talk about when the Cold War really begins, you can kind of trace it back to this point in time where America develops the first atomic weapon. We don't release that information, right? Nobody knows we have this atomic weapon. Everybody kind of knows that each nation has been working on building something that could possibly bring about a quick end to the war, more devastating weaponry. That's constantly going to happen, right? Weapon innovations during wartime. But nobody had ever seen the level of destruction that the atomic weapon is going to unleash, right? And of course, in 1945, and this is after Douglas MacArthur in the Pacific has been conducting his island hopping campaigns, which, just to recap that, he is bypassing strongholds, Japanese strongholds, taking islands that are less heavily fortified instead. He can use those islands with air bases to launch raids against the Japanese mainland, and he can also cut off those Japanese strongholds in the Pacific. It's a brilliant tactic, and it's one that's going to ultimately work very well. All right, and as we close in on the Japanese, and as we eventually are going to be able to cut off the vast majority of goods coming into Japan, right? We cut off 80% by 1945. 80% of all goods that were coming into Japan prior to the war have been cut off, right? Their people are facing privations. Their people are starving. And this is why a quick end to the war needed to be done, right? We needed to bring about a quick end to this war. Otherwise, the Japanese were willing to really sacrifice their own people to continue the war effort, right, rather than surrender in the face of, the war being over. And all options were put on the table. All right, we looked at the numbers of what it would cost for a land invasion. And at that point in time, we fairly well knew, and this was later confirmed, that the Japanese had actually told their civilians, if the Americans attack, that they are to take up arms and fight against the Americans. And that would have definitely increased the death toll on both sides. And, the low end estimates on what it would have cost for an American invasion, and this would just have been American invasion of the Japanese mainland, to completely take the island would have been over 1 million American lives lost. All right. So up to that point in time, you're looking at just under 500,000 American lives lost, another million American lives lost for a Japanese mainland invasion. And that's your ballpark estimates of what it would have been. All right, it could have been higher, could have been lower, but it probably would have been somewhere around there, especially if Japanese civilians started to take up arms and fight against the Americans. They had been brainwashed to believing that the Americans, if they were captured by the Americans, that they would be raped, beaten, tortured. Their children would have been killed in front of them. That type of stuff. We saw that happen on Okinawa, where we had Japanese civilians throwing themselves off of cliffs rather than being captured, quote unquote, by the Americans, right? The Americans are able to liberate that island. So anyway, we have a new weapon, by July of 1945, that could bring about an end to the war without actually putting American boots on the ground. We have no idea, really. I mean, we have an idea about the destruction level. We have no idea, really, about the death rates and the death toll that dropping an atomic weapon would have on a city. But by all accounts, scientists are basically agreeing with the military that there would be far fewer casualties on both sides if an atomic weapon is used versus a mainland invasion. Or even if they continue to quarantine Japan and cut them off from all trade, eventually that would starve out Japan, and the vast majority of their citizens would die, right? So this is something that Truman had to consider. And there's also the idea that, does Truman want to put on display a weapon that would shake and breed fear into the Soviets? That is also something that was definitely probably considered. That stuff, it's not like we had all pure morals, and and dropping the atomic weapon was meant to save more lives than it would lose otherwise. There was a whole stew of stuff that was working at this point in time that eventually led Truman to agreeing to drop the weapon. I'm not saying that he dropped the weapon because he wanted to show American superiority, but that is definitely a factor. All right, we actually have statements from Truman regarding that issue, in which he basically says as much. Excuse me. But anyway, so we have that issue. Eventually, Truman is going to decide to drop the atomic weapons rather than risk a mainland invasion. At that point in time, we have two working atomic weapons, atomic bombs that we can drop. We decide on the city of Hiroshima because of a lot of different things. Number one, it does have a large military complex, military industry that operates within the city. It does have a lot of civilians as well. However, we are going to drop leaflets basically begging those citizens to leave the city prior to the bombs being dropped. Unfortunately, we have been bombing Japan so round the clock up to that point. The Japanese are just, kind of, well, so what? You're going to continue to bomb our city? You've been bombing our city. So unfortunately, they do not heed that warning that something else is coming. And so the question becomes, all right, how do we get this weapon from America to a place where we can drop this off? And a lot of people have considered flying it. Well, there's a lot of risk if you fly it compared to if you take it across the ocean on a ship. And if you take it across the ocean on a ship that moves very quickly, it moves very fast, the Japanese Navy is no longer operating at near the capacity that they once were. This would probably be the safest option. And so the atomic weapon is loaded on board the USS Indianapolis, which is going to steam out of San Francisco on its way to Hawaii before getting refueled and then going towards the island of Tinian, which is just south of Japan. And on the island of Tinian, the bomb would have been assembled. The bomb would have been put onto a plane, the Enola Gay, and then later dropped on Hiroshima. By the way, a little side note, the Indianapolis, actually, after delivering the atomic weapon to the island of Tinian, was sunk by a Japanese submarine. So the safer option, that ship was actually sunk, which that was a terrible, that was one of the worst maritime disasters of World War II that the United States is going to face. And the USS Indianapolis is torpedoed. It sinks in about 12 minutes. Killing the vast majority of people within those 12 minutes that were on board, and then left in the ocean are going to be these guys who were stranded there. Their mission was a secret mission, right? So nobody knew that they were supposed to arrive in the Philippines within a couple of days, and so there was no missing ship report. And so these guys are out there just floating in the Pacific Ocean for 5 days before they are discovered. And during that 5 days, they are going to become the targets of tiger sharks that swarm that area. That particular piece of ocean is infested with sharks. And tiger sharks are extremely aggressive. And there's going to be a large number of people who are going to be killed by these tiger sharks as they wait there trying to get help. Eventually they're spotted and they are rescued, and it is a trying time. I watched a documentary on one of these guys that talked about it that first night. They sank in the middle of the night. It was just after midnight, and the following morning, that's when the sharks started showing up. And that night, he recalled it was the scariest time of his life. There were so many sharks swimming underneath him. He was sitting there floating on the side of a raft, and there were so many sharks swimming underneath him that he felt like he was walking on the backs of those sharks all night long. That would be the scariest thing I could possibly ever imagine. I don't know if I ever told y'all, I went to Hawaii when I was in high school, and me and my brother, we went out on this fishing trip that was meant to catch sharks, right? And right before we pulled back in, I caught a 9-foot tiger shark, which was about 250 pounds ish. Shark, I got a chance to look at his mouth. We didn't, of course, bring him up on board. We were able to cut the line, but when I brought him up to the surface and I could see his mouth, I mean, those sharks are huge and those mouths are massive. Anyway, getting too Shark Week on us, but anyway. That was one of the worst maritime disasters that America is going to face during the war. And I say luckily, and that's not the right word. I guess, fortunately for us, the bomb had already been delivered. But anyway, luck has nothing to do with it, and it was not a good situation in either case. That bomb is going to be, again, assembled on the island of Tinian, put into the Enola Gay, and on August 6, 1945, is dropped on the city of Hiroshima. And following that, we really expected a quick surrender, right? Did not come. There was no sign or, no idea that the Japanese were going to surrender unconditionally, which is what had been called for, without conditions, without any caveats. You're not going to keep any of your land. You're not going to keep any of the islands that you've taken. You're going to completely withdraw from China, all this stuff. Also, part of that was your emperor is going to have to step down. Emperor Hirohito have to step down. And after we do not really hear a response, and then we are contacted with the same conditions that we had been met with before. On August 9th, 1945, Truman is going to authorize the dropping of the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Both of those bombs together in the initial blast are going to kill just about 150,000 people within 2 days, and that's instantly. Nobody had seen that type of death and destruction out of a single weapon before. The Japanese were extremely worried and nervous that the Americans had more of these weapons and could just, city by city, wipe out Japan. And it is after the Nagasaki bombing that they began opening up negotiations with the United States. And eventually, upon the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, they are going to sign a surrender to the Allies, to America, with the sole condition, there's one condition that America finally says okay to, and that is that Emperor Hirohito remain on the throne. Emperor Hirohito will not be tried for war crimes. He will be allowed to keep his place on the throne, and he will stay on the throne of Japan until 1989, when he passes away. His son Akito will precede him. Akito has recently stepped down. He's advocated the throne. He's getting up there in age as well. But anyway, the same cannot be said for people like Hideki Tojo, who's going to be tried for war crimes, as well as other top-ranking Japanese officials who committed atrocities. The general that carried out the rape of Nanking, a lot of those officers are going to be put on trial and sentenced to death. The Manila Massacre, those officers are going to be put on trial, sentenced to death. People who conducted the Bataan Death March, all that stuff. So we will have separate trials for the Japanese that are going to be trying these people for war crimes. And, after the second atomic weapon is dropped and negotiations begin to be opened up by September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese finally signed that surrender, and the war is over. All right. But now there's a question of, okay, what now? We have very different ideologies on the victor side, right? In Europe, Berlin and Germany are both going to be divided up between your major victors, who are basically there as occupational forces to oversee the restructuring, the rebuilding of Germany following World War II. The Russians, the French, the British, and the Americans are all going to be given a quadrant that is theirs basically to oversee, right? And it is from that time period, right, directly starting at the end of World War II and even a little bit before, that the Cold War is going to be ushered in, right? This war of ideologies, this war of words between your Western nations, your pro-democracy nations, and your Eastern nations who are going to vastly be becoming communist. And the more that we see that take place throughout the world, because it takes place in Europe, it'll take place in Asia, it'll eventually work its way to South America. And what people are worried about, whether it be founded or unfounded, is what this could possibly mean for the world, and could this lead to conflict, which it almost does a couple of times, and actually very much does several times, Korea and Vietnam. Anyway, so that's where we are going to end, guys. Just tying up loose ends there, kind of bridging the gap. HL will be rolling into the Cold War next year. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to push this out real quick, and just to say hey, and let you know I miss y'all, thinking about you, and I hope everything is going well for you. For the rest of this week, guys, we are not going to have any work. I'm not going to assign you anything that has to be done with this. Y'all have covered an intense web quest last week and leading into this week. If you have not yet submitted that stuff, guys, make sure you get it into me. I have a couple of people that still have not turned that stuff in. So if you see a 0, guys, in the grade book, does not mean that you can't turn that in. Doesn't mean that you have to sit on that 0, right? Get that stuff turned in to me. All right, we're going to be extremely lenient with this stuff, making sure that these grades get in and that your grades are where where you want them to be. I will begin on Thursday morning getting in touch with people who are going to need to stay with me after Friday to pull their grades up. And basically, guys, just as a recap, the way that that's going to work is if you are passing, all right, then I'm going to say that you're good to go. If you, and I'll put out, once I've contacted everybody, I'll let everybody know that if you have not been contacted and want to improve your grade, get in touch with me. If you are not happy where your grade is, you can continue to stay with me until you get that grade as high as you want it. And then after we reach that period, then you can end class, okay? If you are happy where you are by Friday, then you are done on Friday, all right? But I'll be getting in touch with you about, who needs to stay with me, and letting you know to get in touch with me if you want to pull your grade up and that type of stuff, starting on Thursday. And the rest of this week, guys, we're going to dedicate to making sure that we have all of that work turned in, right? So for my class, if you have any zeros, anything that's missing, that is your assignment for tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. Okay, making sure to get that stuff into me so that we can take care of it and get you good to go. If you are 100% done in my class, check your other classes. All right. If you need extra time in other classes, there's your time, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If y'all need me for anything, guys, if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'm here for you. And yep, that's it. All right. Stay safe out there, guys. I'm here for you. Hope y'all have a great rest of the week, and I'll be in touch with you on Thursday.